All right, it's midweek here on game week, leading up to the first game of the season, Pitt Duquesne on Saturday at Acrisure Stadium. So I figure we kind of go around, hit on a bunch of different topics just to kind of get ready for the game. What are we expecting on Saturday? What do you expect out of Pitt Duquesne? What kind of game do you expect? What kind of crowd do you expect? What players do you want to see on the field? I got a lot of different thoughts that I've been thinking about over the last couple of days of what you should expect to see, what you probably will see, what you should want to see out of Saturday's game beyond just winning and staying healthy. Those are obviously the top two priorities for Pitt. But I think there's some interesting storylines heading into this one, and I think it'll be, we can kind of touch on a few different topics about what we want to see out of this game, what we're expecting out of this game, and what you should go into Saturday's game at Acrisure Stadium looking for. So what do you want to see on Saturday? What do you expect on Saturday? Let's talk about that here on the Wednesday edition of the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, it's the Wednesday edition of the Morning Pitt here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You know the deal. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com. You see the website below, Panther-Lair.com. It's the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. Pitt football, Pitt basketball, Pitt recruiting. You find it all at Panther-Lair.com and message boards to talk to other Pitt fans. And then, of course, our YouTube channel right here. We have lots of video content for you. These daily Morning Pitt videos every day of the week, Monday through Friday. Our weekly live show every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. We'll have that tonight. Post-game shows, practice highlights, videos, interviews, all kinds of things right here on YouTube. So make sure you like and subscribe, and then you won't miss any of it, any of our Pitt video content. All right, Saturday's game, Pitt Duquesne. I don't want to be blunt about it or cynical about it, but do you care? As a Pitt fan, does it do anything for you, the fact that they're playing a team from the city of Pittsburgh in football? I understand maybe you've got a little connection to basketball, or you remember the old Pitt Duquesne basketball games, or it feels like more of a thing. But Pitt and Duquesne haven't played in football since whatever it is, 1939 or something like that. I think people around here think of Duquesne basketball as being a thing, but I don't think there's a lot of respect for Duquesne football. And I don't mean to be critical. I mean, I think they have players and coaches who work really hard. They have good players, good coaches. I think coaches on that staff will move on to, power, FBS and power conference jobs over the next few years. I mean, I think, I'm not saying they're like small time or something like that, but it's an FCS program, a successful FCS program, but an FCS program, right? And I at a school that I think is far more known for its basketball than its football. So, I mean, does it do anything for you? Does it make any? Does it move the needle for you that Pitt's playing Duquesne? Maybe there's a slight bit more interest than there was against, say, Wofford 2 years ago, or Rhode Island, or New Hampshire, or even Youngstown State, or one of these other teams. Maybe it's slightly more interesting because they're playing a team from in the city, but I wonder what kind of impact it has on the Pitt fan base, or what kind of relevance it has to the Pitt fan base, if it really resonates that they're playing this team from the city, and that makes it something interesting or something new. Last week we did the over-unders, right? And one of the over-unders, I had the attendance, 42,515.5, I think is what I set the over-under at. And Jim took the over on that. I was talking to other media people yesterday down in the South Side while we were doing it, or in between interviews with Pitt players and coaches and stuff. And everybody agreed, it's going to be over. And I was sort of skeptical. They did announce 45,000 for the Wofford game 2 years ago. That was a season opener against an FCS opponent. Coming off, there was a little bit more momentum with the program at that point. It was fresh off the 2022 season. They had won 20 games over the previous 2 years, finished ranked, and the Sun Bowl and all that. So maybe there was a little bit more excitement for that Wofford game. Excuse me. But I mean, they announced 45,000. I guess they probably will draw more than 42 for this game on Saturday. But I just don't know if I agree with the idea that there's going to be more buzz. Pitt's going to have this whole, Pittsburgh Day theme throughout the game and throughout the afternoon. I don't know. I don't know if it's going to move the needle. So I'm curious about that, and you can reply in the comments here on YouTube or on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com of are you looking forward to this because it's the first game of the Pitt football season, or is it extra special because it's Pitt Duquesne? I do think there are some people who will be a little extra fired up about it, and they're on the Duquesne football roster. I think I did a quick glance, and there were about 54 kids from the state of Pennsylvania who are on Duquesne's football roster. Probably like more than 3 dozen, probably about 4 dozen of them are from Western Pennsylvania and the Whippeal. And I think for those kids, this game does mean a lot. Like any FBS versus FCS game, the FCS kids go in believing they can win. They want to show the world that they're good enough to play at that level. They want to show that they're just as good as the big kids from the FBS and that they can take them down. And it's happened, not a lot, but it's happened enough that the possibility does exist. And so I think for any of the kids on the FCS teams, like these games do have a little something extra because it's a chance to sort of prove yourself against that team that, is at the quote-unquote highest level, right? And I think with this one, where it does get a little bit more interesting is there's a heck of a lot of kids on that Duquesne football roster who would have jumped on a Pitt scholarship if they had the opportunity to do so. And if I was them, I would be sitting back being like, I'm going to show you that you should have offered me. Like, I'm going to go out in this game, and I'm going to show you that I was worthy of an offer. And you messed up by not offering me a scholarship. And I think that'll give them a little extra juice. Whereas, when they play Wofford, or they played who they played last year, Youngstown State, or they play New Hampshire, or whoever it is, all those kids are walking into the stadium saying, we're going to show these kids from Pitt that we can play with them, that we're every bit as good as them. The guys from Duquesne have a little something extra because it's not just showing the kids from Pitt that they're every bit as good as them. It's showing the coaches that they are good enough that they should have gotten an offer. And I was actually at don't want to go too far into detail, but I was at a camp over the summer, and a kid who plays for Duquesne happened to be there. And he made it clear, not necessarily directly to me, but I was around the conversation. He was talking to some people I was talking with, and he made it pretty clear that he intends to show Pitt that they were missing out. This kid, local kid from the Whippeal, and he intends to show that he's good enough to have earned a scholarship. And he really was taking it personally. And this was a couple months ago. This was 2-3 months ago, and he was already thinking about that game and thinking about what he could show by playing against Pitt. And so, I think if you're Pitt, you're the Pitt players, you obviously have to take every game seriously. You can't overlook any opponent. But, I mean, keep an eye on these guys. Like, they are going to have a little extra juice. They are going to have a little extra something coming into this one. And so whether the crowd does or not, the players for Duquesne, a lot of them have something to prove. And probably a decent number of guys who are going to be on the field, are going to be contributing, are going to be out there trying to show that they were good enough for Pitt. And maybe a few of them were. I don't think you can rule out that possibility. I tell you another interesting storyline, and I don't know, maybe it's just interesting to me, but the Duquesne defensive coordinator, Mickey Jacobs, he's a guy who was on Pitt's staff as a recruiting assistant and then a defensive, I forget if he was a GA or an analyst or something like that. Young guy, really smart guy. I think he went to Duquesne, but he coached at Pitt and spent a couple of years learning under guys like Corey Sanders, Ryan Manilak, and most specifically, Pat Narduzzi. And so what's going to be interesting, and Pat Narduzzi said about this on Monday at his weekly press conference, and I kind of asked him a follow-up question about it as well. What's going to be interesting is that Pitt is in a unique position. Pitt's offense is in a unique position in this game where they're going to be facing probably the closest thing that they'll see all season to Pitt's defense, structurally, schematically, how they approach it. Because Mickey Jacobs, the defensive coordinator, is running something very similar to what Pitt does. And I think we all, Pitt doesn't see Pitt's defense all that much. It's a unique defense. I know there was something a year or two ago that the Minnesota Vikings were, picking up some of the things that Pitt does and sort of doing some of those things. And, some of Pat Narduzzi's philosophies or approaches are sort of catching on nationally. But for the most part, a lot of schools still kind of do their own thing. And a lot of schools don't necessarily do what Pitt does. They don't, overcommit to the run, leave their corners out on islands, and all of those things. All the things that we've seen over the last 11 years, right? But Duquesne is going to be doing something sort of similar. And I think that's interesting because there's been, I think every year in training camp, there are questions about like, is Pitt's defense really prepared for the kind of offenses, or is Pitt's offense really prepared for the kind of defenses they're going to see when they spend all of training camp going against Pitt's defense, which is sort of unique from what they're going to see. And I don't put too much stock in that. They do game planning and scout work and all that kind of stuff throughout the game week leading up to each game and each opponent. So, I think they're well prepared. I don't think they give up too much by playing against Pitt's defense in training camp. But here's a situation where they really are going to be facing something very similar. Different skill sets, different strengths, different players are better than others. So it's not exactly going to be, I don't think Duquesne has a Kyle Lewis. I don't know if Duquesne has a Cruz Brookins, that kind of thing. I don't know if Duquesne has a Francis Brew, but they've got talented players. And again, they're running a system that's sort of similar. And so seeing how Pitt's offense attacks that kind of system, I'm curious about that. I think we're going to get a chance to talk to Cade Bell this week, I hope. And among many things we're looking forward to asking him about, that's one that I'm curious about, of whether he feels like he's maybe got a better feel for facing the defense, because that's the kind of defense he faces all through training camp. I will say about Mickey Jacobs, like, good young rising star coach. He'll be at Duquesne, for a year or two, and then I think he's going to find himself back on an FBS staff as a full-time assistant, and probably keep working his way up. He's a good young coach, and credit to him already being a coordinator at Duquesne, even at the FCS level, and I think he's doing pretty well there. And then on the Pitt side of things, I think always the most interesting thing when you get into these FCS games is, do you get a chance to sort of, I don't want to say empty the bench, because that I don't think fully explains the situation. I don't think it paints the whole picture, because you're not emptying the bench against Duquesne. What you're trying to do is get some of your reserves some quality time. Get them some snaps on the field so they're a little more prepared the next time they have to go into a game, whether it's because injury, or somebody needs a break, or it's a blowout, or whatever it might be. And so when I look at this game, like, I think there's some guys I very much would like to see. I would like to see Pitt be aggressive enough in this game to get a big enough lead that they can not just bring in Cole Gonzalez to take some snaps at quarterback, but also Mason Heinschel, the freshman. And there have been games where Pitt has played where they have not been able to do that. When they beat Albany in 2018, it was 33-7. When they beat Villanova in 2016, it was 28-7. Like, they've had some blowout games for sure. Even the Wofford game 2 years ago was 45-7. I had to remind myself of that score. But you'd like to see them get a big sizable lead so they can go into some of this depth. You don't want Desmond Reed to have to play more than half in this game, if even that much. You'd like to limit Eli Holstein to a certain extent, but you need to get him back into game mode, which he hasn't played any games since the Louisville game. It was next to last game of the season, but it was less than a quarter that he played in that one. And so you need to get him going, but I think you want to get Cole Gonzalez out there. I think you want to get Mason Heinschel out there. I think you want to get these receivers out there running. You don't want to do it that you sacrifice some of the continuity and rhythm that you can build as far as Holstein getting comfortable with Blue Hicks and Kenny Johnson and Raphael Williams, but you do need to get those guys out there. I think you want to get some extra snaps for some of your linebackers, since those guys are going to be called on. You've got a lot of corners. I think you want to get those guys out there a lot as well. But I think I'm most particularly interested in the quarterbacks and what they do, how they use them, how they rotate them, and how deep they're willing to go on the quarterback situation. If it's me, like, you get 4 games and you can still take a red shirt. If I'm Pat Narduzzi and Cade Bell, I want to be in a position to get Mason Heinschel on the field 4 times before the bowl game. So I can still redshirt him, but also can get him valuable snaps. Mason Heinschel is the future of this offense as it looks right now. And while I think Cole Gonzalez is a good player, I think he's an ideal backup as a guy with a lot of experience, the future for the next few years of this offense, for whenever Eli Holstein is done, it's Mason Heinchel. And I think you want to get him as much work as you possibly can, which means you got to be in a position to get him that much work. And so if that means piling it on a little bit more to give yourself a comfortable lead so you can not only get Gonzalez in for 3 or 4 drives, but also Mason Heinchel for 3 or 4 drives, I think that's what you want to do. And I think that's what you should do. That's what I want to see. I want to see how these guys do in a game. And this is probably this is the second half of that, and just as important, don't just put Mason Heinchel and Cole Gonzalez out there and have them hand the ball off to Jalen Williams and Juelz Goff and Caleb Williams and Ja'Karian Turner, or whoever else plays. Like, they need to be throwing. They need to be reading the defense. They need to be making adjustments to the line of scrimmage. They need to be dropping back, reading coverages, and making passes. They do. And because I think you just waste. You waste snaps if he just handoff. You need to run the offense with those guys. This is hugely valuable. I'm not saying you treat it like a scrimmage or an exhibition, but that's the kind of thing you would get in an exhibition. I mean, you look at the NFL preseason games. Guys are throwing in the fourth quarter, even if they've got a lead, because you're trying to get that work. You're trying to find out what guys are capable of and what they can do. So, here's to getting 3 quarterbacks on the field on Saturday. We'll see if they're in a position to do it and if they are willing to do it. All right, make sure you like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com so you don't miss any of our Pitt video content. Check out the website, Panther-Lair.com, for all the Pitt sports coverage. Don't forget the live show tonight at 8:30 p.m., and then we'll be back for another Morning Pitt tomorrow. So have a great Wednesday. We'll talk to you tonight, and we'll see you tomorrow morning for the Morning Pitt right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.